Life is a journey, they say. But today we hear that Jesus begins a journey. But unlike so many journeys we are going to be taking this summer, this journey is not a vacation. Jesus is beginning a journey here at this pivotal point in the Gospel of Luke. And inexorably, he is moving toward the capital, Jerusalem. It's not really a journey in this way that we have come to think of a pleasant walk. It's more like a march. You know, the word march has the god of war in it. Mars. March. So there is a sense in here when I use the word march to describe this journey to Jerusalem. It's moving toward a face-off at the capital. In fact, Jesus sets his face toward Jerusalem. That means he is determined to walk, to march toward his destiny. But it's not the kind of march that the Roman legions marched, the soldiers who would march to war and violence. It is a different kind of march. But before we examine this, let's pull back a little to consider this Gospel of Luke. We'll be in this for a while. It's year C of the lectionary dedicated to the Gospel of Luke. One can think of the Gospel of Luke as in three major movements. The first movement happens in Galilee with all the teaching. So that goes up to the beginning of chapter 9. And then there is this long section, that's the second movement, from chapter 9 to chapter 19. That is the march to Jerusalem, this long journey that takes 10 chapters. And these 10 chapters, this march, will take us all the way through ordinary time. So we will be ending this march at Jerusalem, at the capital, by Advent. And then the third movement is the time in Jerusalem. And we know what happens there. So buckle in. 10 chapters of this march. So, what would you pack for a march? Well, you know, James and John, they're like, let's pack some heat. Let's pack heat. And, you know, can't blame them because Jesus starts his march to the capital in a strange place, Samaria. Why would he start there? We all know Samaritans hate the Jews and the Jews return the favor. Why begin here? It is completely understandable when Jesus goes to Samaria and he is refused hospitable passage. It was utterly expected. What did Jesus think? They were just going to let him pass? After all that bitterness, centuries of hatred? So, the Samaritans hated the Jews, and the Jews hated the Samaritans, and this has been true for centuries and centuries and centuries. In fact, it was old hate by the time of Jesus. By the time of Jesus, this was old. So the history is that back in the 8th century BCE, okay, let's go back 800 years before Christ, because this is where the story begins. The Assyrians attacked the northern kingdom of Israel. And that's how we get the 10 lost tribes of Israel, right? The Assyrians attack the north, and they take the 10 tribes and scatter them throughout the empire. That's where that comes from. But not everyone was scattered. Not everyone was taken. There were some children of Israel that remained. And when the Assyrians took over, they made everyone adapt to their empire's ways. You got to do some of our religious rituals. And so these who remained adopted some of the Assyrian religious piety. And they were the Samaritans. And the Jews who would eventually come up from the south in the southern kingdom, they saw these Samaritans with their mixture of Assyrian practices and Mosaic practices, and they're like, oh, impure. These are not true Jews. They are Samaritans. In fact, we don't even think they had any connection to us. They are not of Israel. We believe that the Assyrians sent these Samaritans into our land to spy on us. You can tell. Look at how impure they are. And so, when the Samaritans were excluded from worship at Jerusalem because of their impure ways, the Samaritans who obeyed the Mosaic law, the Torah, they wanted a place to worship. They wanted a temple. So they built their own temple out on Mount Gerizim. Well, the religious strife between the Jews and the Samaritans, between Jerusalem and Mount Gerizim, came to a head. And in the 2nd century BC, the Jews destroyed the Samaritan temple. And that bitterness just saturated their relationship. So anyone who wanted to go to Jerusalem from Galilee, this is where Jesus is coming from, they would take the long way around. Because Samaria is like a nice direct route, but you wouldn't want to go through Samaria. You want to go past Samaria to the Jordan River, come down the river, walk around this road to Jericho, and then go to Jerusalem. So why is Jesus starting in Samaria today? The disciples are like, well, maybe because, we're expecting a Messiah, a king, who's a warrior. First, he's going to kick some butt, maybe, in Samaria. Right? This is why we're here, right? Create conflict, right? So when the Samaritans refused passage, it was the most obvious. Lord, do you want us to send down fire and zap them? That was the normal course.
Thank you,
But I think Jesus started in Samaria to begin how he wanted to end, without violence, in calling out the violence and rebuking it. He is not that kind of king. He was going to give them the most initial lesson. We're making our way to the capital, but not like what you think, the way the world has done, by blowing things up and wielding fire. So, When Jesus is on his march, it's the antithesis of the God of war. It is a non-violent walk to Jerusalem. But it is not an easy road. Road. You'll hear that a lot in the Gospel of Luke. Road, path, way. Road, path, way. That was actually the name that the earliest Christians called themselves. Not Christians, that was a name given by the outside. Inside the community, the Christians called themselves the path, the way, the road. And what kind of road was this? Jesus wanted it to be clear from the very beginning. It's an antithesis of the kind of march that you see the legions doing. But it is not an easy road. It is not a vacation. And Luke records 3 conversations where Jesus tells the nature of this road, this path, which is discipleship. I want to follow you, Lord. Well, foxes have holes. Birds of the air have nests. But the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You in? Well, Jesus, I totally want to follow you. Got a few things I really need to do. They're very important. So can we have like a negotiation here? And it sounds very hard, this ethic of the road. But what Jesus is trying to say is, it's going to cost. It has cost to be on this road. I'm going to Jerusalem. You might not yet know what's going to happen there, but it's not good. And if you follow me, you're going to say yes to things that are going to challenge you and call the most from you, more cost than you could have imagined. Are you in? Well, thank God this road isn't all that, right? Thank God. And it's 10 chapters, so it has a lot of good news in there. And I highly recommend that you pay attention for the next few months of all the distinctly Lucan material that is in here. So you only get it from the Gospel of Luke. Some of the material you won't have heard in the other Gospels. And it's full of more teachings. So it has nourishment along the road. But Jesus makes no bones about it. The cost of discipleship is hard. It requires our best and our greatest courage. This week, I just kind of wanted to quit on this road. And I'm so tired of this path of announcing freedom, claiming rights for the most vulnerable, protecting women, protecting our people who are often on the edge of power. And yet, this is the road. I can't just take a long vacation and go, just somebody else, Lord, somebody else. So, this path we walk as disciples, it will require the most from us. We cannot quit because the gospel declares freedom. to those who are in bondage. And we believe that. We love that good news. And we are here to continue to announce hope, even in the face of what would destroy hope. Because we are disciples. And we march. Amen.